Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the September 14th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. It's a great day. Yesterday was my mother's birthday, so anytime she could smile, talk to it. Did I talk to her today? I think I talked to her today. She had an amazing birthday. She got to watch Patti and Gladys. Patti and Gladys. She made an inappropriate comment about the Pips, one of the Pips. Um, Listen, it was a comment that you would never want your parent to make, let alone in front of you. And I was skeeved for the rest of the day. But I'm gonna get into that once I start having that conversation related to the verses between the Queen Patti and the Queen Gladys. So listen, man, shout out to y'all who are watching on Facebook Live. Listen, my band is almost up. My band is almost up. Listen, I've been sitting 6 weeks on the shelf and being able to go live on my own Facebook page. So as you can see, if you are watching on Facebook, I'm going live through somebody else's page. A 6 week ban. And I think I know what the ban was from. It was from me talking about that black Nigerian not she might have been Nigerian doctor who was talking about that issue about that pandemic disease that so many of us are experiencing one way or another. I'm not trying to get this person banned. So shout out to you all on Facebook Live. I'll be back on my own on the 17th. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And last but not least, props to y'all who are watching on IG Live. Y'all the stragglers. Y'all don't follow directions at all. But I still appreciate you. So listen, man, we're gonna get right into the conversation. We're gonna start it off heavy. We're gonna start it off heavy. Unless you've been living under a rock, I feel like I say that every episode. You have seen or heard the clips from the Tamron Hall show with Andrew Gillum, former gubernatorial candidate from Florida, and his wife. Quick backstory if you aren't familiar. Back in, I believe it was February. Back in February, he was found in a hotel. The police responded to reports of a possible overdose. In a Miami hotel room, they come in. They found Andrew throwing up. They found somebody else passed out, and so they saw pills everywhere, and the bed was messy, and it was just a scene. And so that information came to light, and a lot of people made a lot of assumptions about what was transpiring. They said, listen, that was a male prostitute that Andrew was cool with, or maybe super cool with. He's gay, he's this, he's that. But what we did know was that his political career went down the issue. Right, it went down the toilet. I'm not a cursor. I'm trying to give up cursing, so I ain't want to say the shit word, right? Just from that situation, because again, it was not a good look for somebody who had given Governor Ron DeSantis, who probably should have won the gubernatorial race in Florida. That's how close it was, even after the recount. But subsequently, he didn't win. But his political future looked. The best years look to be in front of him. They were talking about him possibly as being one of the next presidents of the United States at some point. And so for this to transpire, it wasn't a good look. Insert today. Well, within the last few weeks, he went on Tamron Hall show, both he and his wife, and he had some splaining to do, and he answered some questions. And so I'm gonna play this first clip. Those of you who are not on the YouTube or on the Facebook, make sure you go over there, Quantify LLC, where it's streaming, so you can watch the clip. Here we go.
Honest with you, when you didn't ask the question, you put it out there, is whether or not I identify as gay, and the answer is I don't identify as gay, but I do identify as bisexual. And that is something that I have never shared publicly before.
So Andrew Gillum allowed us in. I don't like the term coming out. He came out. No, he didn't come out. He knew who he was. He just allowed the public in, right? And he allowed us in and let us know what his sexual identity is, and that is a bisexual black man. And I saw the post because anytime you talk about a bisexual black man or a gay black man who's not who doesn't have effeminate characteristics, right? They start talking, they start chirping. And so the blogs, they took hold of it, and just people in general. If you've been on my Facebook, you see how people responded to him being a bisexual black man cloaked under a discussion about infidelity. So let me clear this up, right? Listen, he was unfaithful. That's between he and his wife. I can't comment on that, right? That's between he and his wife and their higher power when it comes to their relationship. And I'm going to play her post, which speaks to this idea of privacy, right? And so I'm not necessarily the infidelity part. I have no comment on that. Yes, being truthful matters. As a therapist who works with couples, yes, you want to have open and honest communication. There's a gap there that didn't exist, or the issue at hand is that maybe he has an alcohol problem, and under the influence he made unhealthy choices, and it impacted his marriage. I fully understand that, and if you want to critique that, you go ahead. I talked about how he was courageous, and I made a post on Facebook about how he was courageous, and so the perspective that I'm coming from is that here you have a cisgender black man who's saying in front of the world that he is bisexual. We understand that that LGBTQ plus population is stigmatized within the black community, no different than mental health. And so for him to allow us in, because he didn't have to, right? He could have just went off into the sunset and said, all right, that's what it was. I'm going to go live my life. I'll find another job out of the public eye, out of the limelight. And yes, some of this pomp and circumstance and being on Tamron Hall is to rebuild his image. It's good public relations. Because again, he is somebody who at one point could have been the face of the Democratic Party. I can't say whether he will or will not anymore. That's not my lane. That's not my lane. I can't speak to that. But clearly he's trying to rebuild his image in the public eye, right? Because he might continue to have political aspirations. And so with that, I'm looking at the perspective of he's courageous because, again, you have a black man saying, this is my truth. And how freeing that is, not only for him just being able to live in public his truth. Because we don't talk enough about this, having to suppress who you are, having to suppress your identity in this world. This world doesn't, they like white LGBTQ people, right? But not necessarily black folk. And if you're a black person within this community, you're triple F'd, right? You're triple F'd based on how you're viewed, not only in society, but how you're viewed within our own community. And so I looked at it from a strengths-based perspective because I'm a social worker at heart, first and foremost. He's giving permission not only for himself to feel and experience life in a way that's true and authentic for him, but he's giving that permission to young black boys, to middle-aged black men, to older black men who aren't living their truth. Spoiler alert, I watched Love Country last night, and the good brother Michael K. Williams, his character allowed us in to him being he didn't say it, but a gay black man who or a same gender loving black man, however you want to categorize it, right? He allowed us in, and we saw him at the ball, right? We saw him at a ball, and he finally opened up. and expressed himself and was his true self, dancing, just being able to be free, kissing his partner, something that he hadn't done up until that point. Why? Because in the black community, again, we talk about having to suppress, especially when we're talking about black boys and black men, because we recognize the impact of toxic masculinity. You know, I hate that term. We're talking about unhealthy people. But having to suppress that because people aren't welcoming you with open arms. And so when I say that he's courageous, it's because he didn't have to do this, right? He's going to be criticized. There was a woman on my post who said, and again, it was all in code, right? I wasn't even necessarily saying code, but she showed us who she was, where she talked about the spread of HIV started from homosexual men, and the fact that he cheated with a man is even more problematic. And unfortunately, that's a perspective that's held by so many within the community. They can't just look at it as infidelity being infidelity. In a perfect world, we would look at it that way, right? But again, the idea of a man being attracted to another man is so taboo and is shunned by every religion that folk cling to. And so, yes, it's a lot of homophobia. It's a lot of shame cloaked in critique of their relationship. Speaking of their relationship, we're going to go to what his lovely wife, who also is courageous, might be even more courageous, right? Because he has her, at one point, had her looking funny in the light, right? Looking silly. Playing all up in her face. Ain't that the new term that folk are using? And she has to answer questions. She has to answer questions about not only his infidelity, but about his identity. Even though she's known prior to her getting in a relationship with him that he identified as bisexual. Which again, I'm sure nobody probably knows. They know now. Because what are her friends going to say? What is her family going to say? What are the public going to say if she says, listen, I love this bisexual black man? Girl, you tripping. And we got people who probably like, see, you can't love both. It's impossible. You're going to like one more than the other. Just a lot of these cliche and these cliche conversations that take place around sexual identity. So we're going to get to his wife.
So for me, it has always been the protection of the intimacy that's between us, the intimacy that is our family and our children. As much as we expose them and share photos, we're still very private with certain things.
Is that why you did not want him to reveal that he told you long before your marriage that he was bisexual?
Not even that he told me, just for him to have to say it. I don't think it's anyone's business.
Shout out to Tyree, who says you can't be a human today or do nothing wrong. Listen, nah, not at all. Not at all. You cannot be human these days, right? You cannot make mistakes. You can't exercise poor judgment because you'll be viewed as such. So with regards to his wife, who talked about this idea of privacy in her relationship, again, in the age of social media, we're in everybody's relationship. We know everything that's taking place, everything that's going on, or so we think. And like she said, just because I post public images of my family, that doesn't mean you're privy to what's taking place within my relationship. Nor should you be privy to what's taking place within my relationship. Come to find out, she told him he shouldn't tell anybody, right? That he doesn't have to allow people in when it comes to his sexual identity, right? It's not anyone's business. And I completely agree. Now, when it comes to this situation about what's taking place within the hotel room, I do think if he has political aspirations, that it was incumbent upon him, like he's done, to come out and talk about that situation. Why? Because the public are going to glean from that certain things. Even if it's a one-time thing, right? We're going to make judgments about your decision making. We're going to make judgments about whether you're an alcoholic or whether you're a drug addict. I mean, if we would have truly did that, you wouldn't have your mans in office. But I digress. And so I understood why he came out about that situation. And attached to that are questions about his identity, which Tamron Hall had asked him, was he gay? And rightfully so. He said, no, I'm not gay. Now, he could have left it at that, right? But you have to ask the question. And this is important. And take notes if you must. You're going to get the answer to the question that you ask. Now, if she would have asked him, how does he identify? And if he would have said nothing, or I'm a heterosexual black man, then we could call BS. But then he would have answered, hopefully he would have answered that he's a bisexual black man, right? So we can't make these assumptions about how people identify. And I know we're in a changing world where gender identity and sexual identity, it's confusing to some people. Me being an adjunct professor for social workers, in a social work department, I had a room full of social workers on my Zoom, and I asked them what their pronouns were. And only maybe 2 out of the 15 understood what pronouns were. And so I had to show grace. I can't say, listen, you don't get it. Why don't you? You're a social worker. No, because again, this is a change. We're adding to our lexicon as a society. And so with that, we have to extend that grace. So we have to extend that grace to Tamron Hall or to others who might not necessarily ask the right question. And so we need to let them know what the right question is to elicit the response that they desire. But back to his wife. Again, how strong is she? How courageous is she? She asked to be in the public spotlight from one perspective, from one vantage point, which was just him being the wife of a politician, even though she has her own background, right? But unfortunately, she's going to be known as the wife of the former gubernatorial candidate. And now add on to that the guy who was in the hotel room. Now add on to that the wife of a bisexual former gubernatorial candidate of Florida. She didn't ask for any of that. And so he has to make amends. And hopefully he started that process of making amends. First and foremost, he had to make amends to himself. If he had an alcohol problem, which he says he does, and he went to inpatient rehab, hopefully he's able to start to work through some of these issues that's impacting her. Because again, she didn't ask for that. And so with that being said, listen, we need to show her love and give her flowers for exhibiting strength. Lastly, we're going to talk about his comments regarding unfaithfulness and infidelity, and this perception that because he's bisexual or because anybody's bisexual, they're somehow more inclined, they're more devious than somebody who is heterosexual.
Bisexuality in and of itself doesn't lead to unfaithfulness. There are men who are in marriages with women who, just because they're married to a woman doesn't mean they're no longer attracted to other women. And at any point in time can slip up, make a mistake, do something, and that is, what it is. The same thing in bisexual relationships. You can be attracted to both. You got a bigger terrain out there that you have to contend with, but you can still choose to physically be with one person. That's a choice that all of us in our marriages and in committed relationships have to deal with.
Your thoughts?
And so I completely agree. Bisexuality does not lead to unfaithfulness. And even his comment that you have a bigger pool possibly to select from, that's not even necessarily true. Because it's the idea that people who are gay or bisexual or queer, however you identify, are somehow hypersexual. We see that a lot with black men when it comes to our gay brethren. Oh my gosh, they gay, they gonna want me. No, they not gonna want you. The likelihood is they're not gonna want you, right? And so this idea that, and maybe it is true, maybe you have a bigger field to quote unquote play from. But even though that gets smaller and smaller, right? If we're honest about it. So, because you're only as never mind, I'm not going to say that comment. I'm definitely not going to say that comment. But this idea of that bisexuality or any type of quote unquote deviation from the norm, which is heteronormative behavior, will lead to unfaithfulness is completely not true, right? You can still choose to be with one person. You can still choose to be with one person. I think about the flack that we tend to give individuals within this specific community, and we somehow almost hold them to a higher standard. Because I had to think about it. If this was him in a hotel room with a female prostitute with drugs and such, yeah, it definitely would have made the news, and he would have had to explain it. But all of the extra, right, the extra energy, the extra motivation that's being attributed to the situation is only happening because he identifies as a bisexual black man, right? And because she's loving a bisexual black man. And so again, man, we gotta, people telling themselves so much. People telling themselves so much. We understand what the motivation is. And even if that's being falsely attributed to you, you have to understand why the perspective is the way that it is. No different than these conversations that we have about the police. Right? Because again, we understand what the perception is. And rightfully so. And it's up to you. It's incumbent upon you to work through your issues of homophobia, of shame, of being misinformed. I'm not out here trying to vilify nobody. But at this stage of the game, baby, I can only extend so much grace before deciding and making a determination. You just want to be plumb dumb. Or you don't have the capacity to understand something different. And it's not necessarily, it's my job as when we talk about this idea of humanity, to want to teach you. But I'm human. And that emotional labor, I choose not to extend that or to participate in that or to do it in every situation. You gotta want to, right? And for most people, you're pretty much set in your ways when you get to a certain age. Now we have to look at what type of harm is your perspective, is your viewpoint causing. And so to the sister who commented about it being because him messing with the men is even worse, in the HIV epidemic that black women experience is because of homosexual down low men, that's caused many folk harm and to experience violence. Just like white folk, when they say, oh, I didn't know, I feel bad. Or now, Drew Brees, I understand a little bit more. Where your lack of understanding caused harm and caused folk to experience violence. So no, you don't get a clap. You get I got you, I see you. And maybe that's exactly what some folk are feeling when it comes to this idea of courage and him being courageous. Maybe I'm able to compartmentalize somewhat and look at each issue within this one situation individually. But again, much love and respect to them, and I hope it works out for them. But we're going to keep the party going, man. We're going to keep the party going, and we're going to get into this 2-year-old getting kicked off this Southwest flight. And so on Saturday, Jody Degyansky had traveled by air 5 times. And this isn't her baby, I don't think. But she says she's traveled 5 times since commercial airlines began mandating that passengers wear masks. She never thought she would end up being booted from a flight for a 2-year-old son eating gummy bears. She says she's super humiliated. She was flying from Florida to Chicago, right? And so they're saying at the start of lunchtime flight, her son had pulled his mask down, resting under his chin, and was eating. She said there was no heated discussion. Who described how a flight attendant told her other families with small children had shirked the policy by eating the entire flight. So pretty much what they're saying is they got away with it by, listen, continue to eat because you can't say anything with regards to that. However, they expect those instances to be very brief. And so her son was eating. He had his mask down. I'm assuming he stopped eating, had the mask down, and they said, whoop, you gotta roll. Because their policy is, their policy is, and I'm gonna get to you, Rothstein, in a bit. Stay tuned in, because I don't. Their policy is 2 years and under, or under 2 years old, you do not have to wear a mask. Because we understand why that is, but 2 years or older, you have to wear the mask at all times, unless you're continuously eating, but there should be no lapse in it. And so this little baby didn't want to follow directions. And you know what I gotta say to that? They, just like Samuel L. Jackson said, there's snakes on this motherfucking plane. There's a baby on this motherfucking plane without a face mask on. And so get that motherfucking baby out of here. Yes, I said it. Get the 2-year-old up out the paint. And I don't blame the 2-year-old. I blame his mama. Because that's on her. That's on her to make sure that he got that mask on. You got to be hyper vigilant. We talking about the Rona. We talk about the Rona out here. We not talking about the flu. We not talking about hand, foot, mouth disease or whatever that is. We talking about the Rona. And so I know her privilege is saying, listen, we flew 5 times. I'm questioning why you flying 5 times, but go ahead. Do your thing. You paid for the flight. Unfortunately, your child wasn't rocking a mask. And so it's on you. Peace out, little baby. I would have personally walked the baby off the plane. I would have picked the baby up, and I would have picked the mom up. But I definitely would have picked the baby up. Walked him to the front of the gate, to the entrance, and I would have sat him there. Peace out, we out. Because again, man, you have other people's lives at stake, at risk. And so, yeah, did he need to eat for the 5 hours? Could he have chilled? I know a 2-year-old. It's kind of difficult, right? But again, you got to be cognizant of this when you're flying. Southwest policy is that if you're taking off the flight because of a lack of mask, you get a refund. And so she's gotten her money back, right? She's gotten her money back. But don't sit here and say I was mistreated. You wasn't mistreated. You just thought your privilege was going to get you somewhere. And it didn't. Devonna Marshall says, facts, that 2-year-old is not responsible for himself. Talk to those parents. Exactly. Exactly. She says she feels horrible that her son had to endure that. Her son don't know what the heck going on. She's upset because her privilege didn't allow her to continue on. If that was Lil Hakeem, they wouldn't even let Lil Hakeem eat. No, Hakeem. We're not giving you no gummy bears, no pretzels. You're not getting no water. Don't go to the bathroom. You sit there. And soon as Tanisha would have said something, they would have called security and they would have escorted you off the plane. They would have picked. You wouldn't need me to take them off. Security would have came and took them off the plane themselves. There was a conversation, I asked a question on my Facebook about should an autistic child be taken off a plane or shouldn't be allowed to fly if they cannot wear the mask. And we understand that autistic children have sensory issues, right? Some of them. That the texture might be a problem. They might not like something on their face for some of them. And so I feel the same way. And Southwest had to ask the parents of a 3-year-old autistic child to get up out the paint. Because we're talking about the Rona. We're talking about COVID-19. We're not talking about the behaviors. We recognize that an autistic child is not necessarily who might have severe behavioral impairment or mild to moderate behavioral impairment. That they can't necessarily control their behaviors. We can acknowledge that. But this is the Rona we're talking about that has killed millions of people, that has permanently injured hundreds of thousands of people who, for some people who are asymptomatic, who are walking around right now with lung damage, who don't know, because the research is just now starting to show that asymptomatic people are showing up with lung damage. And so, no, I empathize with you, ma'am. I empathize with you having an autistic child who has sensory issues or issues with touch or with a fabric who can't put the mask on their face. You have to drive to your destination. We are in an epidemic, pandemic, endemic. We are in. And so, yes, there are some things that just can't happen. And we can't put people's lives at risk because your 2-year-old wants gummy bears. Or because your autistic child doesn't want to wear a mask. They still can be carriers, right? Now, if you told me this autistic child was not could not be a carrier, then fine. But everybody can be a carrier. And the reason why it's 2 and under, because those babies will die from having a mask on and not being able to take it off. So yeah, peace out to the 2-year-old. So I want to address a comment. Bull probably left out. Brought up a comment. Did you walk back your Joe Budden comment after it turned out to be false? I'm not sure what he's referencing. What comment turned out to be false? I don't think I've said that Joe Budden is an abuser. I think what I said was that this isn't the first woman. No, well, I take that back. Joe Budden is an abuser. Joe Budden is an abuser. Because if I think back and my memory serves, and you could Google Rusty, he said on Esther Baxter, when you sit on another human being, you are an abuser. You're an abuser. If you sit on another human being and stop them from getting up, you are an abuser. And this is coming from someone who's been a Joe Budden fan since 2000. Since 2000. And so it pains me to say this. But it's a reality. How many women have claimed abuse by Joe Budden? Is everybody lying? Is there some big conspiracy that people want to see Joe Budden not succeed in the last 15 some odd years? Quite possible. But if we think about it, that's a long time. When that becomes the narrative for not one, like LeBron did, not one, not two, but at least 3 of your relationships. I don't know if I'm trying to think of the people that he's dated. If Kalen said that he was physically, and we're talking about physically abusive, because again, he's been emotionally abusive, and he'll speak to that himself. But again, how do we prove this to be false? In a taped phone conversation. If the phone conversation is taped, why would she go out of her way to say this happened? Is she scorned? Right? That's a hell of a thing to put on your child's father, who's only a few months old. You're that scorned? Nah. I'm not personally buying it. It's not for me to believe though. Right? I have my thoughts about it. And again, this is where we talk about what you can and cannot live with when it comes to artistry, when it comes to creatives. Everybody has their line of demarcation, what they will or will not accept. There are those who cannot listen to R. Kelly ever again. Completely understand. There are some who can completely understand because they're able to separate the person from the art. No different than Joe Budden. Does some of his prior actions go against everything I believe in as a therapist? For sure. But he can rap. Right? He can rap. I think Dave Chappelle did a skit. Where, he talk about Michael Jackson, but he made Thriller. Right? We do it every day. What we can and cannot accept. So I see you say here that his baby's mother said herself she was trying to smear his name because they were going through a custody battle at the time. I mean, we also know women who experience domestic violence often retract, right? They often don't go through with pressing charges. So, am I supposed to believe that? Take her for a word? So what word should I take? If you're telling me that I should take the word of her saying that it was a smear campaign, I should take that word, but I shouldn't take the word of her saying that when he was drunk, he dragged her. I should believe that and not that. I'm not understanding. And again, you say R. Kelly and Joe Budden, and I'm not going to continue this for too much longer. You say R. Kelly and Joe Budden are not the same. That's to you. Again, my initial point, everybody has their line of demarcation. Everybody has a tolerance level of what they will and will not accept. Allen Iverson is one of my favorite basketball players of all time. He put his wife out in the cold butt naked. If I was somebody who's experienced domestic violence, and they learned about that, and they say they don't want to be a fan of Allen Iverson's anymore, I can completely understand it. It's up to the individual. But as far as the claims being false, listen, at some point, if you're my homie, I got to have a conversation with you. If I'm Maul, if I'm Rory, if I'm Parks. Bro, people keep saying you're abusive in all of these relationships. What is it about you that people feel comfortable in saying? Is why? Because the narrative is already there. And of course, abusers are going to deny it, right? We recognize that too. We know abusers are going to deny that they're abusers. And we know that victims/survivors of abuse often deny that it's taking place. So no, I don't necessarily, we can't say that something is true or false. We can just say this is what the evidence is. This is what the evidence is. And with that said, we're going to get right into our final topic. Going to be super brief. Patti versus Gladys. I didn't watch it and I'm sad. But what I did see, and what I take that back, I did tune in and out, right? But then Lovecraft Country came on, and listen, I'm gonna turn Patti and Gladys off for Lovecraft Country. But what I saw was the antithesis of Brandy and Monica. Not only two women who appeared to genuinely like each other, but they sang. They sang. They showed love. They paid homage to one another, and they sang. If I wanted to play you, and that's why I couldn't listen to some of them, because you just playing your tracks from your album. I could do that when they make the playlist. But Patti and Gladys sang. And then they brought Dionne Warwick out. They like, listen, we gonna turn it up for y'all. This is a celebration. Cause not only we made it this far, we got timeless music. But we love what we do. And we love our peers. And so for that, man, let me get their little picture up right quick. For that, we gotta celebrate. I don't even know what could follow this. I saw like Anita Baker, Sade. I would be all in, because you know how much I love Anita Baker. If you don't know, I love Anita. I can't think of anybody else that would be worthy of me watching for the entire hour. Or 2 hours. Yeah, I can't think of any other verses that I would watch for 2 hours. But Anita Baker and Sade. So I had to speak on that. I didn't see it, but I'm gonna watch it probably tomorrow in the gym, getting my listen on, man. So with that said, I got some new Umar for y'all tomorrow. I'm going to play the new Umar. I think I'm coming back because I got class tomorrow night. So it's going to be either tomorrow or Wednesday when I make this return. But I got some new Umar where we talking about grits. But I'm going to play
donations.
The old Umar. Donations. Hashtag
Donations.
Spotify LLC.
Donations. Gifts. More gifts.
And I'm not John Wall throwing up gang signs. I'm out. I'm not even commenting on that. We out these. Peace.